Hey everyone, and welcome to the Sunny Go One Piece podcast. On this episode, we're going to be diving into episodes 373 through 375, which will cover manga chapters 480 through 483. And this is it. As the Straw Hats give it one last burst to take down Oars and Moria, do they have enough left in the tank? Alrighty, so synopsis. As the sun rises upon the Straw Hats, they have to band together one last time as a complete crew to take down Oars once and for all. But even with Oars taken care of, Moria does one last desperate attack to stall until the sunrise. This takes Luffy past all of his physical limits to take down Moria once and for all as well. Alright, so as far as differences go, there really aren't any, and I can happily say there were pretty much none. Aside from slightly longer scenes showing the random people getting their shadows back and their reactions to it, beyond that, this was actually a very faithful adaptation. So let's just get into the episodes then. So Luffy has been exhausted from the strain of containing 100 shadows in him, but amongst the celebration and jubilation, they still have a huge task of making Moria comply and order the shadows to return to their owners. I honestly like that aspect of Devil Fruits. I like that they don't have the usual easy cliche of if you defeat the user, the effect wears off. We'll eventually see that this property of Devil Fruits comes into play with many other fruits as well later on down the story. It kind of eliminates sort of that easy solution, and it forces the storytelling into more creative avenues, with one very notable exception, which happens much later on in another arc, which I might touch upon slightly in the spoiler section. We'll see how I'm feeling. But anyways, before they can even really think about that, Oars, crazily enough, gets back up since he feels no pain. And so all that damage he does have, but he doesn't really feel, so he just keeps getting back up. And it's seemingly looking like in order to actually defeat Oars, they will actually need to destroy the zombie body, or again, remove the shadow. But without Salt left, only the former option exists, which seems like an impossible task, as pretty much everyone who can fight is knocked out with the exception of Usopp and Nami. Also, with the added danger of the sun coming up in a few minutes, it is looking damn near hopeless for everyone at this moment. And I know Thriller Bark gets a lot of crap for how it seemingly drags because of all these fake outs, but I personally love this sort of ramp up by creating more and more tension with bigger and bigger obstacles. And just when all hope seems lost and everyone left standing is falling into hopelessness and despair, Zoro wakes back up like a boss that he is. I always get a chuckle out of Lola's line. At this point, I can't tell which one is the zombie talking about Zoro's ability to walk off an attack from Oars like that. We will see later on in the subsequent episodes, as well as beyond this podcast, that it does affect Zoro, but we'll get to that when it becomes an issue. Honestly, another reason I love these moments like this, as corny as it is for them to all just kind of get back up, I don't really care. It's so awesome seeing the Straw Hats not give up, and as soon as they realize the fight's not over, they get right back into fight mode and pick themselves back up for what is essentially round 3. And yeah, it's just another reinforcement of that great lesson for real life setbacks. And I don't know how you can't be hyped for this moment, as it builds up, revealing one by one the other members have already been on the move, prepping for another counterattack. But this time, it's all 9 of them working together. Nami is with them finally, Frankie is actually conscious now, and of course Luffy is now back. And yeah, we finally get a true Straw Hat combo attack, including Brook. I do find it a bit unbelievable that they came up with this plan so quickly without anyone noticing, and it seems to have happened off screen too. Because when you look at it, the plan is incredibly complex and precise, and yet they all seemingly know what to do exactly and when to do it. This definitely seems like something Nami cooked up with the help of Frankie and Chopper's mechanical and medical expertise, respectively. So it's interesting that as complex of a plan it is, everyone knew exactly what to do without anyone noticing them planning it. Not only that, but we get to see for the first time since East Blue, Zoro's Santoryu secret technique, the Sanzen Sekai, or the 3000 Worlds, which again, we haven't seen since he attempted it on Mihawk, but this time it actually lands, and this all sets up Oars to have his spine straightened so that Luffy can crush it from a direct assault from above with a gigant bazooka. And it finally looks like they've won as we see reaction shots from everyone, including Sindri and Zombie Lola, who both have made it out safely. With his spine destroyed, even though he's still alive, he can't move anymore. But it's not over yet, as now Moria has regained consciousness, but it's not looking like he's ready to submit and give up his shadows. However, he's clearly weakened and damaged. We finally see a little more into the mindset of Moria and his MO. Moria does give Luffy props for the crew that he's put together, but he knows from personal experience that the Straw Hats are nowhere near strong enough to sail the New World. And as has been alluded to in little bits here and there, up till now Moria was pretty similar to Luffy in that he used to be a young hotshot pirate that dreamed of becoming the Pirate King. But somewhere along the way, when he reached the New World, he ran into the Yonko pirate Kaido and got absolutely decimated to the point where all his crew were killed. Forced to retreat back to the first half of the Grand Line, he then adopted this sort of mentality that we've seen throughout the arc, that the reason he failed was not because of his own shortcomings, but because his crew was to blame, which leads him to believe that if he had a crew that couldn't die, that he wouldn't get attached to, and he would be able to use as just tools, he can finally prevail over Kaido and the New World. And when you think about it, it's kind of really sad, and you almost feel a little sorry for him. Only a tiny bit, though, because he is annoying and a jackass. But notice anything about Moria's cautionary tale here? It relates very closely to the character arc that Luffy has been going down since the beginning of Water 7, and especially on Long Ring Longland, where he got his ass handed to him by Aokiji and almost lost one of his crew members. This whole section of the series has pretty much been dedicated to pointing out how Luffy still has a lot of growing to do in order to be strong enough to protect his crew. And we'll see later how this moment foreshadows a few things in the coming arcs for Luffy's character. But another thing to realize is that while Moria is technically right, as we've already seen, the Straw Hats are clearly outmatched with some of the absurdly strong opponents out there, like the Admirals, Mihawk, Blackbeard, Shanks, and most likely the other Yonko pirates. But one of the big themes that Oda is highlighting in Thriller Bark is showing that it's not just about Luffy being strong enough to take on these obstacles to protect his crew. It's going to be a team effort, which is why I think Oda is emphasizing the concept of teamwork and combo attack so much in this arc, to kind of contrast Moria's technically correct but ultimately flawed philosophy that it's not enough to just amass power and an unkillable crew, but that a truly successful pirate king not only is strong but can work together and elevate his crew. It's not just about Luffy being strong enough to protect his crew, but the crew working together in tandem to protect each other. Again, it really is cool going back and rewatching and rereading these older arcs with the hindsight of knowing where all this leads, but Oda really is setting up so many things with this arc, which again is why I think every arc and every detail is worth paying attention to and not just skipping. And I know Thriller Bark, Skypiea, and then another later arc called Punk Hazard often gets mentioned that they don't really like it and kind of want to skip them, but I implore everybody not to skip any arc in One Piece, at least the canon ones. You can skip all the filler ones if you want. But yeah, with that, let's get back to the story as Moria, in a last-ditch effort, using a technique called Shadow Asgard, where he gathers back all the shadows and stuffs them into him, using the same concept that, Nightmare Luffy used, but is 10 times more with 1,000 shadows this time, which is insane when you think about it. But among those shadows, includes Robin, Sanji, Zoro, and Luffy's shadows. So he's essentially got their strength as well, in addition to the 9,996 shadows that he has. And yeah, this is it. It's do or die. With the sunrise imminent and Moria using what appears to be his ultimate attack, they've got to muster their strength for one last assault to get their shadows back in what appears to be less than a couple minutes. It's becoming quite clear, however, that Moria has become desperate himself, despite claiming to hold the advantage. Then you get the classic shonen anime moment where all seems lost, but the heroes don't ever back down. But I think, again, what One Piece does so well in terms of heightening the stakes and weight of this is we get to see it from the perspective of the regular people. In this case, Lola's crew, the Rolling Pirates. This works so well because if we saw it only from the hero's perspective, we don't quite have a measuring stick for just how amazing of a thing they're actually doing. And by having normal people there to give their reaction as well as to see the Straw Hats are fighting, what they're actually fighting for, reinforces us to that sort of the human aspect of the fight, which is kind of lost on some anime series. Again, like I mentioned with the Brook and Ryuma fight a couple of podcasts ago, One Piece is really good at making the fights more than just about the flashy, punchy, kicky stuff. It's happening for a reason, and here not only we get to see just how strong the crew is, but exactly why they're strong compared to Moria. Luffy is allowed to go all out to the point where he actually warns his crew that he's going to push himself a bit too much, but he knows his Nakama are going to be right there to back him up when he inevitably goes down after he's won. Whereas in stark contrast, Moria is all alone, quite literally, as he's just sucked out all the shadows from his zombies, leaving them dead. With Perona gone, with Absalom and Hogback unconscious, it's all just him. Because of this, Moria is pushing himself to a point that's actually hindering his ability to fight, as he's even struggling to stay within himself because of the sheer weight and concentration that it requires to control 1,000 shadows. The other really cool moment that I really love about this scene, and something I'd never expect, is just how much I'm really liking Lola's character. I never thought anything of it because she started out as such a strange character with her shadow in the zombie form, but right from the get-go, Zombie Lola, despite being under the control of Moria and Absalom, still managed to maintain her good heart and nature, befriending and saving Nami on multiple occasions, and here we see why. Lola, the person, is just as strong-willed and an honorable person, willing to take responsibility for the fact that they put Luffy in a position to fight on their behalf. And even though he was going to fight Moria anyways, but that's beside the point, they put Luffy's body through quite an ordeal, stuffing that many shadows in him in the hopes he might save them, and she feels it's not only the right thing to do, to stand by him and face the consequences no matter what, but also to stick up for her, the rest of her crew. And she even says for them to back away into the shadow and just let her stay. But she's got a great crew as well, and they all eventually stay as well, which is really cool to see. And yeah, again, the Rolling Pirates is another example to sort of contrast Moria's flawed philosophy on how to create a good, successful pirate crew. But yeah, now that is an amazing person and character to the point where she's willing to put her life on the line for her crew. And that's leading by example, as her crew, seeing this, decides to stay behind as well despite how scared they are. I also love that even in such a dramatic and impactful moment, Oda still manages to squeeze a very small joke that doesn't necessarily take away from the moment, as she says, "Look at them, they aren't phased." But then they show a shot of Usopp absolutely terrified. I mean, he's not running or anything, but he's definitely just scared shitless in that moment. Luffy then, for the first time since Enies Lobby, decides to finally activate Gear Second again, knowing full well just how much of a strain on his body that it is, as Lucci mentioned. Not only does it require a huge amount of stamina, but it's actually chipping away at Luffy's life, and this on top of the fact that he's already pretty exhausted. It starts off well enough, as every attack that Luffy lands is a huge blow to Moria, causing him to spill shadows out and get weaker. But then Moria tries to entomb Luffy in a brickbat cube and smashes him to death. And I love we get this callback to sort of early Luffy fights, like within the East Blue and also with Crocodile, where the villain tries to intimidate Luffy, and Luffy just kind of replies back with the most dense and straightforward answer that he can't be crushed, with the villain interpreting this to be Luffy trying to sort of jaw back at them and sort of stand tall. But the reason that Luffy gives for why he can't be crushed is not anything profound or badass. He literally just states that he can't be crushed because he's made of rubber. And he says this with a straight face. And I just love how every time Luffy does this, it completely throws the villain off their game, because they're trying to intimidate Luffy, but all it accomplishes is them getting really annoyed at how stupid the conversation has become. And yeah, this reminds me a lot of the first round of Luffy versus Crocodile, where Luffy just like throws out a bunch of ridiculous moves against Crocodile anytime Crocodile is trying to intimidate Luffy. And also similarly when he's fighting Arlong and Arlong threatens him, he's like, "Do you know what the difference between our species is?" And then Luffy just literally starts stating all the physical differences that they have with each other, like the teeth, the nose, the jaw, and then the webbed the webbed hands. And Arlong just gets absolutely annoyed at this. And yeah, this again reminds me of that. Moving on, then Luffy does the thing we were all kind of wondering about when he first introduced the gears, is what would happen if he combined the two? And this time Luffy does really push himself to the brink as he performs gear third while in his gear second state, now giving him both the speed and raw power of the two combined. And rightfully so, everyone is concerned that Luffy this time is really overdoing it after seeing what happened to him after Enies Lobby. As the final burst, he performs a Gomu Gomu no Gigant Jet shell where he launches himself at Moria like a mortar shell almost. But yeah, with those final two attacks, Moria is finally defeated with his final ominous warning about the nightmares that await them in the new world as he starts to puke up all the shadows. But it appears to be slightly too late as everyone without shadows are set ablaze as the sun comes up. Of course, none of us thought for 1 second that this was at all going to actually take and that the shadows would reach them in time. Like, yeah, there was never any doubt. However, for the characters in universe, this had to be pretty terrifying to see people burn up right in front of their eyes. And this is one rare instance where we get to see the far reaches of just how much Luffy and the Straw Hats help, as we see many different people from all over the world get their shadows back suddenly. And we even get to see the maid that Sindri's shadow was originally taken from in a woman maid named Margarita, clearly shown with the mention of how she has an aversion to plates. And the first thing she does upon the shock of the shadow returning is she drops some plates, smashing them. It's also really sweet how her employer is just happy for her. And in a way, Sindri gets a pseudo-happy ending, which is really nice. It's a really unnecessary little scene, but, I love stuff like this. It adds to the expansiveness of the world, and it's perfectly suited for a long-running manga and anime series because, in a movie or maybe even like a short-run TV series, you don't have enough time to sort of devote, minutes to something like this. But in a manga or anime series, yeah, you got all the time in the world. I also love that anytime Zoro is upon death's doorstep and there's really not much he can do, he just accepts it and poses epically as he dies, calling back to what he says back on Little Garden when he was trapped in the candle service set. But of course, everyone is saved and everything is fine. We also get confirmation that Absalom and Hogback have survived. And I feel like I should explain the wordplay that Absalom does here with the whole Ryleback thing, but in actuality, the joke is that it doesn't make any sense and that he's just mashing words together in both English and Japanese. So there's really not much to explain there. With the battle over, the Straw Hats take an important beat to reflect just how much Luffy has been pushing himself lately, especially when using his gears. It's a pretty sobering moment for all of them. Usopp realizes that they need to get stronger and to pull more of the weight so as to not have to push Luffy so much. This is another step of the other side of the character progression arc, which began on Long Ring Long Land, that the Straw Hats have been on, where Water 7 was more about Luffy's need to become stronger to protect his crew, which also will feed into an even larger plot point that is about to start. But also, on the flip side, the subsequent arc Thriller Bark has highlighted how far Luffy is willing to push himself to achieve that, and that it's too much. And this arc shows that the crew needs to also get stronger for Luffy as well. And to further emphasize this point of a crew's strength and their relationship with their captain, Moria was brought in to clearly show us the polar opposite approach, to show us how easily defeated a crew that, is that has no loyalty or care for their nakama or their captain. And a captain basically that treats his subordinates like disposable pawns. And you might be wondering why I keep hammering this idea home every time it comes up, but it's actually a really amazing storytelling point when there's this sort of overarching thematic story thread that ties it in many of the characters and central themes of the story together to further you into the series as it goes on. And I think that's one of the things that One Piece and manga slash anime series in general do so well compared to any other storytelling medium, aside from maybe novels and some of the rare American TV shows. Although One Piece does it better than most of its contemporaries in the manga and anime medium of basically having these sort of long character arcs that span the entire series, but then weaves things into the immediate story arc. And so it creates sort of this cohesive build-up, which I really love seeing when some of those moments actually culminate. One little side thing that I just want to mention about the scene where the gravely injured old man pops up again to thank them. It's revealed that all the people on the Thriller Bark that had their shadows stolen had a name for their group that I had never sort of. I mean, I'm sure I've heard it before, but I've never really internalized. But they actually call themselves the Victims Association, and that the old man is the president. I'm not sure why I never really remembered this fact, but I just noticed it on this rewatch. However, this joyous moment of jubilation and celebration is suddenly interrupted by Nami coming to the horrifying realization that Kuma is still a threat on the island and he's just sitting above them all on the Denden Mushi call with none other than the Gorosei. This is where things get insanely intense. Like, we all knew they wouldn't get burned up, but this moment with Kuma, I actually felt scared for them, as I had no idea how they were getting out of this one, as Luffy is already passed out, and the others are completely worn out. Like, how in the F are they going to fight Kuma at this point? And with the Shichibukai's reputation already damaged due to Crocodile's fall, the Gorosei are now afraid that if news came out that another Shichibukai has fallen, there would be some serious damage to the world government's reputation as the world power that controls everything, and that is something they can't have. And as a result, Kuma has now been ordered to annihilate everybody on the island. Zoro, of course, steps up to take Kuma on, but we all know that there's no way he's defeating Kuma, especially with that crazy devil fruit that he possesses. The Rolling Pirates, to their credit, actually try to fight back, but Kuma then blasts them with some sort of shockwave that seems to be in the form of a bear paw print, which is convenient for a man that's named Kuma, which is bear in Japanese. His ability has the bear paw print theming. We unfortunately don't get to see or learn much about this fruit in this episode, and we'll have to wait till the next podcast for the next 3 episodes. But before we end this podcast, we have a new opening to discuss. So yes, in the original broadcast of One Piece in Japan, starting from episode 373 running through 394, for 22 episodes we get a remixed version of We Are performed by the K-pop group TBXQ, and we've already heard them perform the second to last ending theme, Asu wa Kuru Kara, or Tomorrow Will Come, and they actually will go on to sing one more opening theme later on as well. And this version of We Are was created to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the anime. And now, unlike the Straw Hat version of We Are that we got back in Enies Lobby, this is a full-on remix with a completely brand new take on the song and a new animation to accompany it. And so, yeah, if you're watching this in the Funimation or the Crunchyroll releases, I believe you don't get to see this, and it just keeps using Jungle P due to some rights issues with all of TBXQ's songs, unfortunately. That's why you never saw Asu wa Kuru Kara, or you'll never see the next opening theme, Share the World, unfortunately. But definitely go check all 3 songs out because they're great. Both the songs and the animation that usually accompanies them are really interesting. And yeah, as for this song, I personally love this remix. It's definitely got a very K-pop sound, which suits it really well, giving it sort of a modern sound with sort of synth sounds and a much more bouncy and vibrant vibe to it. Of course, the original's tone suits the pirate fantasy tone perfectly, and I do like the original We Are more than this one, but it's nice to hear such an iconic song updated with a modern sound, and it's so damn fun and energetic too. The accompanying animation is kind of hit or miss for me with this opening, as it includes your standard shots of the crew sailing and a focus on each member as they appear walking on the beach, calling back to that shot of them in the second opening, Believe, where there's a shot of them, from the side as they're running along the beach. But this time, there's more of them, and they're kind of walking to begin with. They'll eventually start running later on. We also get a slight callback to the moment from the original We Are, where the Going Merry is sailing happily in front of a map, but in the remix, the map is just now a backdrop overlaid by all the countless friends and people they've met along their journey, so far as the Straw Hats kind of run across the screen. Then we get another direct callback to the original as the villains flash on screen to the beat in pretty much the exact same way they did in the original, but now updated with all the villains that we've seen just before the chorus starts. Then probably my favorite moment of this version is when the song gets to the Poketo no coin, Soreto you wanna be my friend. We get to see Vivi's farewell, as well as a shot of the Mary sailing off into the sunset, honoring the other nakama of the Straw Hats that aren't there with them currently in Vivi, Karu, and Mary, which I thought was an incredibly nice touch, and I love this moment. And the other cool thing is that it goes from the Mary sailing into the sunset, which then transitions immediately to the Sunny blasting off into the dawn of a new day, signaling sort of that sunsetting of the Going Merry and the era of the Thousand Sunny, basically going off into the future now, which is a really cool, obviously a very obvious symbolism, but yeah, I like this moment a lot, and it's probably my favorite moment of the entire opening. Then, in a really nice bit of symmetry, since this has been extended to fit the new, longer opening theme time, we get the chorus once again, but this time we get the Poketo no Roman, Soreto you wanna be my friend. It now pans the camera around to highlight Brooke, who is going to be the newest Straw Hat Nakama. So basically, anytime the you wanna be my friend line comes up, it shows the past and future nakamas of the Straw Hats, which is so amazing. Like, it's so cool how they chose to do that. And then to call back to the end of the original We Are, where it shows Shanks and his crew, we not only get them back, but we also show the other bigger players in the One Piece world that have been introduced, like the Marines, the Gorosei, Whitebeard, Blackbeard, etc. And this was clearly put in there to also serve the purpose of reminding the viewers of these characters to prepare for the impending future arcs, as all these characters will go on to play huge roles. And overall, yeah, I really love this opening song, as the animation that accompanies it is pretty good, with some amazing callbacks and homages to things and characters that celebrate the series thus far. But as amazing as it is, I also feel like there are moments that are just really boring, with much of the sort of the animation is just static shots of the crew just kind of running or walking in the corner of the screen, as well as the opening kind of being used to sort of just remind the viewers of impending arcs. But again, the song is so awesome, I can forgive sort of the unevenness of the animation. So that will bring this podcast to a close, but boy, are we in for a treat in the next podcast, as we get to finally talk about one of the most recognizable and iconic One Piece moments in the series, in addition to the suspenseful conclusion of how they escape Kuma. But yeah, if you did enjoy this, send me a like or comment, and if you want to join me on this journey of rewatching One Piece, please consider subscribing. Check out my Instagram and Twitter account at SunnyGo Podcast for updates of when I post new episodes, as well as to see pictures of my manga collection. I've also started streaming on Twitch fairly sporadically, and so yeah, if you want to come chat or watch me play games, I'd be happy to see you at twitch.tv/sunny__go. And as always, I wanted to thank you for taking the time to listen to my podcast. Just a tiny spoiler section that I kind of want to mention a few things that I brought up earlier, but if you don't have any interest in that, I hope to see you on the next episode. Bye. Alright, so spoiler sections. There's really nothing too big about this one, but I mentioned the fact that this Moria's power, and as well as most devil fruits, they don't wear off after the user either gets knocked out or killed or anything like that. Like, we see that with Boa Hancock, especially where the manga kind of is currently, where she basically turns everyone to stone. And even if Boa herself is knocked unconscious or killed, the people that she turns to stone cannot be undone until she decides to release them. Similarly with Moria and his shadows, as well as I'm trying to think of a few other people. Well, obviously, anyone that gets frozen in Aokichi's ice, they're frozen in ice. But the big one, though, that kind of contradicts this, it seemingly, is Sugar. In the Don Quixote family, when Sugar turns everyone into toys, it is absolutely paramount that she does not ever get knocked unconscious or even obviously suffers death, because then her powers wear off. And I'm wondering if that's sort of a way to balance her fruit because of just how powerful that fruit is. It's almost incredibly powerful to the point where it's just OP, like it's just overpowered. And I wonder if that's Oda's way of kind of like balancing it, and sort of the in-universe way that sort of nature balances that power out by not giving it the property of being able to maintain its effects after the user is disabled. It's a very interesting thing, but again, I like the fact that most of the time it's not an easy solution to just take out the devil fruit user if they have sort of a permanent altering ability. And then one thing I kind of wanted to mention, and I'm not going to get too much into detail as we'll talk more about this as they generally come up, but I do like the fact that Moria's story doesn't necessarily end here, as we keep getting drip fed more and more about Moria's sort of story, particularly in Marineford, as well as when Kaido is finally introduced. We see just how badly Moria was defeated by Kaido and what really drove him to become who he is in this arc. And yeah, I mean, Moria is definitely one of the least popular Shichibukai among the fans, and for good reason. I mean, he really doesn't do much, and I think, again, he was mainly just set up to be a cautionary tale for the path that Luffy is headed down, because obviously we do see something similar happen to Luffy, but he obviously takes that in a different direction, where Kuma again returns and just absolutely decimates them in Sabodi. And so with that major defeat just on the doorstep of the new world, they need to regroup and come back stronger. Whereas Moria took that defeat and basically just gave up on his crew and essentially just tried to brute force his way through it. But again, his mentality is so weak that there's no way that he could have ever lasted long in the new world to begin with. So yeah, I like this sort of foreshadowing story parallel with Luffy and Moria. But anyways, that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in the spoiler section. So I thank you for listening and see you later. Bye.